Hi, I'm Elizabeth, this is the Bookish North, and it's that time of year again. It's time to talk about reading goals. So in this video I'm going to wrap up my reading goals from 2019 and look at how I did with those. And I'm also going to share with you my plans for 2020, the coming year. How the heck did we get there already? Anyways, I'm definitely a list person. I am motivated by ticking things off a list or putting them into an Excel spreadsheet. So reading goals really work for me. I think reading is probably the one area in my life where I don't really need goals or lists. I would read as much regardless, but I tend to use my reading goals to steer me in certain directions. And also I'm not all that rigorous with my goals. If I lose interest in something over the year, because let's face it, this is arbitrary goals I set myself in this period around Christmas, New Year's Eve was what I was going to say. So if I lose interest in something completely during the year, I'll just drop it or I will add new things. But I really enjoy having a list and starting the year with a list like this. So that's what I'm going to do. So let's start with looking at how I did for 2019. I have my book and my reading journal to help me remember what I thought at this time last year. So the first goal is the Goodreads challenge. I always set that at 80 books because that's enough of a stretch for me not to finish it in the first half of the year, but also it's a number I have surpassed every single year since I started counting my reads, so it's not really stressful. And in 2019 I ended up reading 108 books, so that's a big check for that one. Then I had two goals that were designed for me to read more of the things I actually know I will enjoy. Because for the previous few years I had set a lot of challenges for myself that was about challenging myself to get out of my comfort zone. And for this year I just wanted comfort zone, really. I wanted to improve my reading year by focusing on reading stuff that I actually like. I mean, that shouldn't really be something you need to tell yourself to do, but I tried. So the first goal that was aimed at that was to reread at least 10 books, because what better way to read stuff you know you like than reading stuff you have already liked, right? So I ended up rereading 13 books, so that's another big check on my list. And then the second goal that had this in mind was to read at least 10 books by authors I had previously read and loved books by. So that to me was authors I had read prior to 2019 and loved at least one of their books. And this I also achieved. I stopped counting after 10, but I think it's like 15 or 16 books that would fall into this category this year. I would also say that this didn't necessarily work out the way I had planned it to, because I would definitely say that my biggest disappointments of the year all fall into this category, because when there are authors and books you have loved, that creates certain expectations to what you read next from them, and not all of these books lived up to my expectations, sadly, but yeah, it's still a big check again on achieving the goal I set myself. And then my next goal was not very well thought through. For one thing, it didn't really go well with the previous goal, and secondly, I didn't know my baseline because this was something I hadn't been tracking before. But I told myself I wanted to read at least 20 books by new-to-me authors. And this goal turned out to be wildly under-ambitious. I think I had achieved this by March or something, and I ended up like completing it twice more during the year. So I think I ended up with 63 books by new-to-me authors, and that even includes that if I've read multiple books by the same author during the year, they have only counted once. So it turns out I just automatically read a lot of new to me authors, so that was a goal that didn't really achieve anything. But yeah, I did complete it, so check for 4 still. And then I have 2 final goals that were more stretch goals, goals that I really needed to make conscious choices and make a bit of an effort to complete. And the first of those was geared at me trying to read a bit more geographically diverse. So I said to myself I wanted to read at least 1 book from each of the inhabited continents, or each of the continents excluding Antarctica. And I mean, I did achieve this as well. I would say I achieved it technically, but probably not the spirit of this goal, because I did read at least 1 book from each of the continents, but for most of the continents I read exactly 1 book. So I read 1 book from South America, 1 from Africa, and 1 from Asia, and that's not really what I wanted, and I ended up I think with 5 from Oceania. So I still read predominantly from Europe and North America, which is what I wanted to challenge. But you know, technically I did complete my goal. I read books from 16 different countries, but most of those European countries, and the US and Canada. But I guess it's another check. I just don't want to make it as big as the other ones. And then my final goal is a goal which I sort of have almost every year in some variety, and that is to read at least 30 books that were on my shelf at the beginning of the year. Because I buy a lot of books, I have acquired a lot of books. I think I have about 800 unread books on my shelf, and I'm still excited about them. I want to read them. So reading 30 of those books seems very achievable at the beginning of the year, when basically all the books I own fall into that category, and then it grows harder and harder and harder throughout the year as I have acquired new books, and my interest for the new and shiny will always win, apparently. So this one I did not complete. I read 17 books that were on my shelf at the beginning of the year. But still, I managed to complete 5 out of 6 of my reading goals, so I'm not too bummed out with how I did last year. So that leads me to my plans for the coming year. And I've decided not to make my priorities all that different, because I still have some of the same challenges, and let's go with those things that I didn't do so well with this year and try to improve there next year. That's the plan. So for one thing, the Goodreads challenge is still set at 80. That's not going to change. Then I'm gonna keep my goal of reading 30 books that were on my shelf when 2020 began. And right now that is super easy, because that includes every single one of my books. And then I've also told myself, as I mentioned in my previous haul video, that I'm not going to buy any books for the first 2 months of the year, except for the very last days of February. So I have 2 months now to exclusively read my own damn books. So that should give me a good start. And then I just need to keep that going through the year, because I am still so very excited about all of the books. Well, maybe not all of them, but enough of them that 30 shouldn't be a problem. Really, come on, Elizabeth, you can do this. Then my second goal that is still geared towards this is that I want to tell myself that all books acquired in 2020 should also be read in 2020, with the exception of books acquired in December, because there might not be time, especially if they're Christmas presents. But yeah, read 30 books off of my own shelves, and all books bought in 2020 should also be read in 2020, which should, I'm looking at you in the camera there, which should limit my book buying to only the things I know I can finish, preferably within the month I'm buying them. And then there are a few exceptions where I know that's not going to happen, but not buy more books than I can actually read in the year I'm buying them. Hold me to that, will you? And then my third goal is still supporting this overarching goal of reading my own books. And that is, I've made a list of 10 authors whose books I have, I've previously read some of their books and really enjoyed them, so I've hoarded more of their books. So I want to read at least one book from each of these 10 authors, which are all books I have on my shelf. I was originally planning to include some other authors on this list, like Deborah Levy and Rachel Cusk, which are authors I really enjoyed reading in 2019 and I want to continue on with. But I have in fact read all of my books that I own by them. So I'm not going to put them on this list, but they might end up being books I buy during the year and thus have to read because I've bought them. But yeah, this is my list of authors. I want to read at least one book from each of them, and they are all already on my shelves. So at first we have, of course, Doris Lessing. I am hoarding her books. I have, I don't know how many, nearing 50 I think, and I've read 14 or 15 of them. So there's plenty to choose from. Preferably I would read more than one book by her, but at least one. Then I have Toni Morrison, where I have read only Beloved, but I thought that was a great book. So I bought like 6 or 7 other books by her. Still haven't read a single one. Virginia Woolf, I have only read Mrs. Dalloway, but I have all of them. Siri Hustvedt, I read a few of hers, but I still want to move on. I've got 4 or 5 unread ones still on my shelf, I think. The Finnish author Sophie Oksanen, which I still have, I think 3 to go. Sara Stridsberg from Sweden, I have at least 2 of her books unread on my shelf. James Baldwin, which I know I have only 1 book unread on my shelf, but I want to read at least that one, and he might get into the category of books I buy this year as well. I have the Indonesian author, I'm sorry for this pronunciation, but Pramadaya Ananta Tuer, which I've read the Baru Quartet, and that was brilliant, and I bought at least 2 other books by him because of that. Not read any one of them, but I will this year. We have Ryszard Kapuczynski, which is a Polish writer. I think I have 2 of his books unread on my shelf, so one of those or both. And then we have Ngugi wa Thiong'o. I think he's from Kenya, if I don't remember wrong, I also have several books unread on my shelf from, and I've really enjoyed the ones of his that I have read. So that's 10 authors I want to explore more of in the year to come that are all already on my shelf. Then I still want to focus on reading a more geographically diverse collection of authors. This year, instead of going by continent, I'm going to say that I want to read books from, representing at least 25 different countries, and I'm talking about the nationality of the author here. I read from 16 countries this year, so 25 is a big leap, but I think it's possible. And you may have noticed that the list of 10 authors already mentioned also includes authors from 7 different countries. So there's a chance, if I manage to keep to that goal, to also make a big dent in this one. Then I've realized that for the past 2 years, which coincidentally is also the time that I've been very involved with BookTube, I have been reading fewer and fewer Norwegian books. And I don't really like that development, so I have made a goal this year to read at least 20 Norwegian books. I used to have reading goals to read at least 30 new Norwegian releases every year, and I did that every single year, but I haven't for the past, I think the past 2 years. This year I've only read 4. But I don't want to make this goal about recent releases this year, because that has made me exclude a lot of books that I really want to read, that are Norwegian classics or modern classics, or even books just a decade old that I want to read, but I've never read them because they really didn't fit into any of my goals. So I'm making it more general now and say just Norwegian books. So I'm looking forward to reading like the Alberta trilogy by Cora Sandel, for instance. But yeah, I have a bunch of books I want to read and want to get to, and this is gonna motivate me to pick those books over other books. And again, these are all books you will find on my shelves. So I got one more goal, which is my 7th goal this year, and that is to read as many of the authors that will come to the literary festival at Lillehammer as I can manage before the festival. It is Norway's biggest literary festival. It's an international festival, so there's always a lot of interesting authors from other countries coming in. The program hasn't been released yet. It won't be published until April the 1st, but a few of the prominent guests have already been announced, and a few of them are authors I have already been interested in reading. So far we have of international guests, we have Valeria Luiselli, whose book The Lost Children Archive I have on my shelf and been meaning to read for a while. We have Ocean Vuong, we have Mariana Enriquez and Samantha Schweblin, and then a few Norwegian authors that I also want to read some of their newer works by, for instance, Agnes Ravatn and Marit Eikemo. So we'll see how far I get on that list. I'm not going to set a number for how many I want to read. I'm just going to make a list. So far those people are on it. And when the program is released, I'm going to add some to that. And then I'm going to see how many I manage to read before June and the festival starts. In addition to that, I plan on participating in some challenges on BookTube. For one thing, I want to try to do the Curious Adventure, which is a non-fiction reading challenge launched by Natalie at Curious Reader. I will leave a link to that down below if you want to see what that's all about, but basically it's 12 prompts guiding you to read non-fiction, which is a perfect challenge for me. I'm also gonna participate in the read-along of the Hilary Mantel books in January and March, and then the release of the 3rd book in the Thomas Cromwell trilogy in March. So that's something I look forward to. I also have exciting plans for February that I will talk more about when that is closer by. And yeah, I'm sure I'm going to participate and jump on some bandwagons throughout the year. But those are my main goals as far as reading goes. So basically, try to diversify my reading a bit more geographically and to read as many books I can off of my own shelves. So I love this time of year where everybody is posting best of the year videos and reading goals. So I'm probably gonna go watch some of those now. And I hope to be seeing you soon. Until next time, bye bye.